Chapter 1. The Invitation to Hawthorne Manor. The snow fell in thick, deliberate flakes outside the window of Hercule Poirot's flat in Whitehaven Mansions, each one a perfect hexagon of crystalline silence. Poirot sat at his small walnut desk, legs crossed, a cup of thick dark chocolate balanced on his knee. The gas fire hissed softly. The only other sound was the measured ticking of the ormolu clock on the mantelpiece. It was the 22nd of December, and London lay muffled beneath a white shroud. Poirot's moustaches, those magnificent symmetrical works of art, twitched with mild irritation. He had planned a Christmas of perfect order, a solitary dinner of poulet rôti and pommes soufflées, followed by the reading of David Copperfield in the original English. Yet the postman had disrupted this idyll with a single envelope of heavy cream vellum, sealed in crimson wax with the crest of a rampant griffin. He slit the envelope with a silver letter opener shaped like a miniature sword. The paper within was scented faintly with cedar and bergamot, an expensive touch. My dear Monsieur Poirot, the season of goodwill compels me to extend an invitation you may find irresistible. My family gathers at Hawthorne Manor for Christmas, as we have done these 40 years. This year, however, shadows linger beneath the holly. Old quarrels, new suspicions, and, dare I say it, the possibility of danger. Your presence would lend us the comfort of your unparalleled discernment. The manor lies 20 miles south of Oxford, snowbound and splendid. A suite has been prepared. The train from Paddington arrives at 3:17. My motor will meet you. Do say you will come. Yours in anticipation, Eleanor Hawthorne Poirot folded the letter with geometric precision. Lady Eleanor Hawthorne. He had heard the name whispered in Mayfair drawing-rooms. Widow of Sir Geoffrey Hawthorne, the shipping magnate. Mother of one son, Reginald, whose gambling debts were the stuff of discreet club gossip. Grandmother to a brood of lesser Hawthorns. The manor itself was Tudor, sprawling, and, according to country life, possessed of a ballroom that could accommodate 200 without crowding. He sipped his chocolate. The invitation was irregular. Ladies of Eleanor's station did not summon detectives to Christmas house parties unless they feared something worse than overcooked goose. Yet the phrasing, the possibility of danger, was delicate, almost playful. Poirot's little grey cells stirred like cats stretching after a nap. He reached for the telephone and dialed the familiar number of Scotland Yard. Jap, mon ami, it is Poirot. Tell me, what do you know of Hawthorne Manor? Inspector Japp's voice crackled down the line. Hawthorne? Old money, older grudges. Sir Geoffrey drowned 5 years ago. Boating accident off the Isle of Wight. Verdict accidental, but tongues wagged. The son, Reginald, is a bad lot. Cards, horses, actresses. The daughter-in-law, Victoria, keeps a cool head and a sharp tongue. Why? I'm invited for Christmas. Japp gave a short laugh. Better you than me, Poirot. Take your galoshes. The place is a barracks in winter. Poirot replaced the receiver and considered his reflection in the mirror. The green eyes gleamed. The moustaches positively quivered with anticipation. A house party, a snowstorm, a hint of menace. What could be more délicieux? The train from Paddington was half empty, its passengers muffled in furs and scarves. Poirot occupied a first-class compartment alone, a copy of the Times open to the crossword. Outside, the countryside slid past in monochrome. Hedgerows black against white fields, church spires pricking the low sky. At Didcot, a porter in a brass-buttoned coat announced that the line beyond was threatened by drifts. The train would terminate at a country halt called Lower Hawthorne. A Daimler waited on the platform, its chauffeur a tall, cadaverous man with a face like a disappointed bloodhound. "Mr. Poirot, Lady Eleanor's compliments. The roads are treacherous, but we'll manage." The car purred through narrow lanes flanked by stone walls furred with snow. Bare oaks arched overhead, their branches laden like the arms of mourning widows. After 20 minutes, the manor appeared. A vast irregular pile of mellow brick and ivy, chimneys smoking against the pewter sky. Garlands of holly and ivy swayed the entrance porch. A Christmas tree the height of 3 men glittered in the courtyard, its ornaments flashing red, gold and emerald in the weak afternoon light. The front door opened before the car had fully stopped. A butler, tall, silver-haired, with the impassive dignity of a cathedral gargoyle, bowed. "Welcome to Hawthorne Manor, Monsieur Poirot. Her ladyship is in the long gallery. This way." The entrance hall was a cavern of oak and armour, its floor checkered in black and white marble. A fire roared in a grate large enough to roast an ox. Above the mantel hung a portrait of Sir Geoffrey Hawthorne in naval uniform, his eyes following Poirot with stern disapproval. From somewhere deeper in the house came the sound of a piano. Chopin's Nocturne, in E-flat, played with more enthusiasm than accuracy. The butler led him up a staircase whose banisters were carved with leaping stags. Portraits lined the walls. Hawthorns in periwigs. Hawthorns in crinolines. Hawthorns with monocles and moustaches that rivaled Poirot's own. At the top, double doors stood ajar, revealing a gallery that ran the length of the house. Windows on one side looked out over the snow-covered rose garden. On the other, a row of tall mirrors reflected the scene infinitely. Lady Eleanor stood before a blazing fire, a petite woman in her late 60s, dressed in dove-grey silk with a rope of pearls at her throat. Her hair was silver, coiffed in soft waves. Her eyes were the pale blue of winter skies. "Monsieur Poirot," she extended a gloved hand, "how good of you to come. I feared the snow might detain you." "Your invitation was most persuasive, madame." Poirot bowed over her hand with courtly grace. One does not refuse a lady in distress. A flicker of amusement crossed her face. Distress? Perhaps I exaggerated. Yet one feels uneasy when the past refuses to stay buried. Before Poirot could reply, a young man sauntered through a side door. He was tall, dark and handsome in the careless way of those born to privilege. His dinner jacket was impeccably cut, but his tie was slightly askew, and his eyes held the restless glitter of a man who had lost at cards and did not care who knew it. "Mother, you didn't say we were expecting the famous Poirot." His voice was light, almost mocking. "Reginald Hawthorne, at your service, though I warn you, the only mystery here is how cook manages to ruin the plum pudding every year." Lady Eleanor's lips tightened. "Reginald, Monsieur Poirot is our guest." "Delighted." Reginald offered a hand that Poirot shook with deliberate firmness. "You'll find us a dull lot, I'm afraid. Unless someone's murdered the butler, which would at least liven things up." "Reginald!" A woman's voice, sharp as cracked ice, cut across the gallery. Victoria Hawthorne glided into view, a vision in emerald velvet. Her blonde hair was pinned with a diamond arrow. Her expression suggested she had just bitten into a lemon. "Must you be vulgar the moment a guest arrives?" "My dear Vicky, vulgarity is the spice of life." Reginald winked at Poirot. "Besides, Monsieur Poirot deals in murder, doesn't he? We're simply providing local colour." Poirot smiled blandly. "I deal in truth, monsieur. Murder is merely the consequence when truth is denied too long." Victoria's eyes narrowed. How very Belgian of you!" From the corridor came the sound of hurried footsteps. A girl of perhaps 20 burst in, cheeks flushed, clutching a bundle of sheet music. She wore a simple wool dress the colour of holly berries, and her dark curls escaped their pins in charming disarray. "Granny, the carol singers are here. Oh!" She stopped short at the sight of Poirot. "I beg your pardon. I'm Clara Hawthorne, Reginald's niece. Are you the detective?" "Enchanté, Miss Clara." Poirot inclined his head. "I'm Hercule Poirot, at your service." Clara's eyes widened. "Golly! Wait until I tell Miss Pritchard. She's the governess. She reads about you in the Strand." Lady Eleanor rang a small silver bell. "Jenkins will show you to your room, Monsieur Poirot. Dinner is at 8. We dress, of course." The butler materialized as if conjured. Poirot followed him along a corridor lined with tapestries depicting the labours of Hercules. Ironic, he thought, given his own name. His suite overlooked the rose garden, now a white wilderness. A fire burned in the grate. On the dressing table lay a sprig of mistletoe tied with red ribbon. As Jenkins withdrew, Poirot unpacked with methodical care. 3 silk handkerchiefs, a bottle of eau de cologne, his travelling case of toiletries arranged in perfect rows. He opened the wardrobe and paused. Hanging inside was a dinner jacket, his own size freshly pressed, with a note pinned to the lapel. "In case the snow delayed your luggage. E.H. thoughtful, yet presumptuous." Poirot's moustaches bristled slightly. He removed the jacket and examined the stitching Savile Row, but not his tailor. Someone had taken his measurements with unnerving accuracy. At 7:30, he descended to the drawing-room. The guests were assembling, Reginald lounging against the mantel, a whisky in hand, Victoria examining her reflection in a gilded mirror, Clara perched on a sofa, swinging her legs, and a newcomer, a stout red-faced man with a monocle and the booming voice of a retired colonel. "Poirot, eh?" the colonel barked. "Heard of you. Solved that business on the Orient Express, what? I'm Colonel Bantry, old friend of Geoffrey's. Used to shoot with him in Scotland. Enchanté, Colonel." Poirot accepted a glass of sherry from a footman. "You knew Sir Geoffrey well. Like a brother. Fine shot, fine sailor. Tragic, that accident. Still, the sea's a jealous mistress." A gong sounded. The party moved toward the dining room, a vaulted chamber hung with crimson damask. The table was set for 12, though only 8 places were occupied. Crystal gleamed. Silver candelabra flickered. At each place lay a Christmas cracker wrapped in gold foil. Lady Eleanor took her seat at the head. Poirot was placed at her right, Colonel Bantry at her left. As the soup, consommé à la reine, was served, conversation flowed like the wine. "Tell me, Monsieur Poirot," Victoria said, her voice honey over steel, "do you believe in ghosts? The manor is said to be haunted by a lady in green who walks the long gallery on Christmas Eve." "Ghosts, madame? No, but I believe in the ghosts of unfinished business." Reginald laughed. "Careful, Vicky. He'll have you confessing to pinching the silver." The crackers were pulled with much hilarity. Poirot's contained a tiny silver whistle shaped like a bird. He slipped it into his pocket. After dessert, bûche de Noël and a pudding that flamed spectacularly, Lady Eleanor rose. "Shall we take coffee in the library? The tree is lit, and the carol singers are in the hall." The library was a cathedral of books, its shelves rising to a painted ceiling of cherubs and clouds. In the centre stood the Christmas tree, a Norwegian spruce hung with ornaments of breathtaking delicacy. Glass baubles hand-painted with scenes of winter crystal icicles, tiny silver bells that chimed at a breath. Beneath it, presents wrapped in tissue and ribbon spilled across a Persian rug. Poirot paused, arrested by the beauty of it. Each ornament seemed to hold a fragment of light, a tiny world unto itself. He reached out to touch a ruby bauble and froze. Reflected in its curved surface, distorted yet unmistakable, was the face of a woman watching him from the doorway. She wore a maid's uniform, but her eyes were wide with fear. Before he could turn, she vanished. Lady Eleanor's voice floated across the room. "Monsieur Poirot, do try the mince pies. Cook has outdone herself." He joined the group by the fire, but his mind was elsewhere. The maid's expression had not been one of curiosity, but of warning. Outside, the snow continued to fall, erasing footprints, muffling sounds. Inside Hawthorne Manor, the ornaments glittered like 1,000 watchful eyes. And somewhere in the shadows, Hercule Poirot felt the first cold breath of danger. Chapter 2. The First Shattered Bauble. The clock in the entrance hall struck 11 with a deep sonorous chime that seemed to vibrate through the very bones of Hawthorne Manor. The carol singers had departed, their lanterns bobbing away into the snow like fireflies swallowed by night. The guests lingered in the library, warmed by brandy and the afterglow of song. Outside, the wind had risen. It moaned around the eaves like a restless spirit. Hercule Poirot stood apart, a small glass of tisane in hand, observing the room with the quiet intensity of a cat at a mouse hole. The Christmas tree's lights had been dimmed to a soft glow. The ornaments caught the firelight and threw it back in fractured rainbows. Lady Eleanor sat in a high-backed chair, her pearls luminous against the black lace of her gown. Reginald sprawled on a sofa, one leg over the arm, swirling brandy. Victoria examined a porcelain shepherdess on the mantel with the air of a woman pricing it for auction. Clara had curled up with a book of carols, humming under her breath. Colonel Bantry dozed by the fire, his snores punctuating the silence like distant gunfire. A newcomer had joined them after dinner. Mr. Felix Carstairs, a thin, sharp-featured man with the restless eyes of a ferret. He had arrived late, his motor car stuck in a drift 1/2 mile from the gates. Carstairs was a journalist for the Daily Clarion, ostensibly here to write a festive piece on Christmas at an English stately home. His notebook never left his hand, and his questions about the manor's history, the family's fortunes, Sir Geoffrey's death, had been met with polite deflection. Poirot's gaze lingered on Carstairs. The man's shoes were still caked with snow, his cuffs bore faint stains of ink. A journalist, yes, but one who asked too much and listened too closely. Lady Eleanor rose. "I fear I must retire. The excitement of the day." She pressed a hand to her temple. "Monsieur Poirot, you will forgive an old woman her frailties." "Of course, madame." Poirot bowed. "But permit me one observation. You spoke earlier of shadows beneath the holly. Shadows do not cast themselves." Her smile was thin. "Tomorrow, perhaps, we shall speak plainly. Good night." One by one, the others drifted away. Reginald lingered longest, draining his glass. "Care to join me for a nightcap in the billiard room, Poirot? I've a bottle of Ornament Armagnac that's positively sinful." "Alas, monsieur, I'm a man of regular habits. Sleep is the foundation of clear thought." Reginald shrugged. "Suit yourself, mind the ghosts." He sauntered out, humming "God Rest You Merry Gentlemen" off-key. Poirot remained by the tree, drawn to a bauble of deep crimson glass. It was larger than the others, painted with a scene of a ship foundering in a storm. He tilted it gently. The liquid inside, some trick of the glass-blower, shifted like blood. A gift, perhaps, commemorating Sir Geoffrey's death. He made a mental note. At length, he too retired. His room was warm, the bed turned down, a hot water bottle nestled between the sheets. Yet sleep eluded him. The manor creaked and settled around him like an old ship. At midnight he rose, slipped on a dressing gown of quilted silk, and padded barefoot to the window. The snow had stopped. The moon hung low and full, turning the garden into a silver desert. Footprints, small, hurried, led from the kitchen door to the old icehouse and vanished. Poirot's breath fogged the pane. Someone had been abroad after the household slept. He returned to bed, but his mind raced. The invitation, the maid's frightened glance, the journalist's probing, pieces of a puzzle not yet formed. At last, he drifted into uneasy slumber, dreaming of shattered glass and a woman's scream. He woke to the sound of a bell, frantic, insistent. Grey light filtered through the curtains. His watch read 6:47. Throwing on clothes with the speed of long practice, he descended the main staircase, 2 at a time. The library door stood ajar. Inside, chaos. Clara Hawthorne stood in the centre of the room. One hand pressed to her mouth, the other pointing at the floor. Jenkins the butler hovered behind her, pale as parchment. On the Persian rug lay Felix Carstairs, face down, one arm flung out, as if reaching for something just beyond grasp. Blood pooled beneath his head, dark against the intricate pattern of the carpet. Shards of crimson glass glittered around him like frozen drops of blood. Poirot knelt, careful not to disturb the scene. The journalist's skull had been crushed by a single, precise blow to the temple. The weapon, a heavy brass candlestick from the mantel, lay nearby, smeared with blood and hair. But it was the ornament that held Poirot's attention. The crimson bauble from the tree now shattered, its painted ship fractured into a dozen pieces. One shard, larger than the rest, bore a single word etched in gold: truth. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, "the first shattered bauble." Clara found her voice. I came down early to practice the piano. The door was open. I thought Mr. Carstairs had fallen asleep reading, but then I saw—" She swayed. Poirot caught her elbow. "Sit, mademoiselle. Jenkins brandy." The butler moved with surprising speed. Clara sipped, colour returning to her cheeks. "Who could have done this? We were all asleep." "Were we?" Poirot's eyes swept the room. The French windows were closed, but the catch was loose. One sharp tug would open them. Snow on the terrace outside showed no footprints. The killer had entered and left by the door. The fire had burned low. Ashes stirred in the grate. On the desk, Carstairs' notebook lay open. The last entry, scrawled in haste, read, "Ask R about the will. V knows more than she says." Footsteps thundered in the corridor. Reginald burst in, hair tousled, dressing gown flapping. Good God! Carstairs! He stared at the body, then at Poirot. "You'd better do something, detective. This is your sort of mess." Victoria followed, wrapped in a peach silk robe, her face a mask. "Reginald, control yourself. Monsieur Poirot, what does this mean?" "It means, madame, that someone in this house feared what Mr. Carstairs intended to print." Poirot turned to Jenkins. "Who discovered the body?" "Miss Clara, sir. She screamed. I was in the pantry." "And the household. Where was everyone?" Jenkins recited with mechanical precision. "Lady Eleanor retired at 11. Colonel Bantry at 11:30. Mr. Reginald was last seen in the billiard-room at midnight. Mrs. Victoria went to her room at 11:15. The staff retired to their quarters above the stables at 10:30, except Mrs. Beale the cook, who was up until 1 baking." Poirot nodded. "And the governess, Miss Pritchard?" "In her room adjoining the nursery, sir. She has been indisposed." Clara whispered, "I heard footsteps in the corridor around 2. I thought it was the maid turning down the lamps." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Footsteps! Très bien." The door opened again. Inspector Japp strode in, snow still clinging to his overcoat. He had arrived by the milk train, summoned by a telephone call from Lady Eleanor at dawn. His gaze took in the scene with professional detachment. "Poirot! Thought I'd find you in the thick of it. Lady Hawthorne's in hysterics upstairs. Says she invited you to prevent this sort of thing." "Alas, mon ami, I am not a miracle worker. But, observe, the ornament, shattered deliberately. The killer leaves a signature." Japp grunted. "Flashy. Any idea who?" "Not yet, but the bauble was chosen with care. Crimson for danger, perhaps, or blood, and the word truth, a warning or a taunt." They were interrupted by Colonel Bantry, red-faced and bellowing. "What the devil's going on? Carstairs dead? The man was a damned nuisance, but murder?" "Precisely, Colonel," Poirot said. "A nuisance eliminated. Tell me, did you speak with Mr. Carstairs after dinner?" "Briefly. He was pumping me about Geoffrey's will. Said there was talk of a codicil. I told him to mind his own business." Victoria's voice cut like a blade. "The will was read 5 years ago. Everything went to Reginald, with trusts for Clara and me. There is no codicil." Reginald smirked. "Unless dear Mamma's been rewriting history." Lady Eleanor appeared in the doorway, supported by Miss Pritchard, a thin, nervous woman with spectacles and a tremor in her hands. "Enough," the old lady said. "Monsieur Poirot, the police will handle this, but I beg you, find who did this before Christmas is ruined." Poirot bowed. "Madam, Christmas is already stained with blood, but I shall find your killer. First, I must examine the scene undisturbed." Japp cleared the room. Poirot worked methodically, measuring the angle of the blow, noting the absence of defensive wounds, pocketing a thread of green wool caught on the candlestick. The bauble shards he gathered into a silk handkerchief. Each piece was hand-blown, the paint applied with a brush no thicker than a hair. Expensive, personal. In the grate he found a scrap of paper, half-burned. With tweezers he extracted it. Trust fund, forgery, ask V. The rest was ash. Japp whistled. Blackmail? Or journalism taken too far, but the ornament? No, that is the killer's flourish. Outside, the snow began again, soft and relentless. Poirot stood at the French windows, staring at the blank expanse of terrace. No footprints. The killer had known the house intimately, knew which doors creaked, which floors betrayed a step. He turned to Japp. "Seal the room. No one enters without me, and find the maid who was frightened last night. She saw something." As constables arrived from the village, Poirot returned to the library alone. He stood beneath the Christmas tree, now one bauble short. The gap was glaring, like a missing tooth. He reached up and unhooked a green ornament, an emerald star. Its surface reflected his face, distorted and grave. "Mon petit étoile," he murmured, "you are next, perhaps, or you will help me catch a murderer." From the corridor came the sound of sobbing. Clara being comforted by Miss Pritchard. Somewhere above, a door slammed. The manor held its breath. Poirot slipped the star into his pocket beside the crimson shards. The first bauble was shattered. The game had begun. Chapter 3. Secrets Beneath the Mistletoe. The snowstorm arrived with the fury of a spurned lover. By 9 o'clock, the wind howled around Hawthorne Manor like a pack of wolves, rattling the leaded windows and piling drifts against the doors. The telephone lines sagged and snapped. The village constable's motor car was marooned halfway up the drive. Inspector Japp stamped snow from his boots in the hall, cursing the weather and the isolation it imposed. "Trapped like rats," he muttered to Poirot. "No reinforcements till the ploughs come, if they come before Boxing Day." Poirot merely adjusted his muffler, a vision in dove-grey cashmere. "Mon ami, isolation is the detective's friend. It prevents the murderer from fleeing and forces the truth to surface." The household gathered in the morning room, a long chamber panelled in walnut and warmed by a fire that spat and crackled. Breakfast had been a grim affair. Kippers untouched, toast curling at the edges. Lady Eleanor presided over the coffee pot with the rigid dignity of a queen at a funeral. Reginald nursed a headache and a tumbler of brandy masquerading as hair of the dog. Victoria sat apart, shredding a lace handkerchief. Clara had been sent to her room with a dose of sal volatile. Miss Pritchard hovered like a nervous moth. Colonel Bantry broke the silence with a bellow. "Damned disgrace! Carstairs was a nosy blighter, but murder in a gentleman's house unchristian." "Unchristian?" Victoria's voice cut like a shard of ice. "He was here to dig up filth about Geoffrey's death. Perhaps someone decided to bury him instead." Reginald raised an eyebrow. "Careful, Vicky. That almost sounded like motive." Poirot entered then, snowflakes melting on his shoulders. He carried a small leather case, his murder bag, Jap called it. All eyes turned to him. "Mesdames et messieurs," he announced, "the storm has made us a little world unto ourselves. Good. Now we shall speak plainly. Mr. Carstairs was killed between 1 and 3 o'clock. The weapon was the candlestick, wiped clean of prints except for a smear of blood. The bauble was smashed after death, arranged around the head like a halo. This was not rage. This was theatre." Lady Eleanor's hand trembled as she set down her cup. "Theatre? You mean the killer enjoyed it?" "Précisément. Enjoyed, or wished to send a message. The word truth. It was etched with a glass cutter, not painted. Someone prepared this ornament in advance." A collective shiver ran through the room. Outside, the wind screamed. Poirot continued. "Let us begin with alibis, Lady Eleanor. I retired at 11. My maid Agnes brought me hot milk at 11:30. I read until midnight, then slept. Reginald? Billiard room till 12:30. Alone, then bed. Ask the footman. He locked up after me. Victoria? I had a headache. Took a powder at 11:15. Miss Pritchard can confirm. She brought me a hot water bottle." The governess nodded frantically. Yes. Mrs. Hawthorne was in her room when I left at 11:30. "Colonel Bantry?" "Saw the ladies to their rooms, then turned in. My man valet undressed me at 11:45. I snore. Ask anyone." Poirot's gaze swept the room like a searchlight. "And the staff?" Jenkins cleared his throat. "Below stairs by 10:30, sir. Cook and the maids in their attic. The footman in the stable loft. I locked the baize door myself at 11. Poirot nodded. "Bien. Now the motive. Carstairs' notebook mentions a will, a trust fund, forgery. Who benefits if old secrets stay buried?" Reginald laughed, a brittle sound. "We all do, old boy. The Hawthorne fortune's a house of cards. One puff of scandal, and it collapses." Victoria stood abruptly. "If you'll excuse me, I need air." She swept out, her silk skirt whispering like a secret. Poirot watched her go, then turned to Miss Pritchard. "Mademoiselle, you were governess to Clara when she was small." "Yes, sir, and to Master Reginald before he went to Eton." "Tell me about the night Sir Geoffrey died." The governess paled. I wasn't here. It was August. The family was at the Isle of Wight. I stayed in London with Clara. She had measles." "Convenient," Reginald drawled. Lady Eleanor's voice cracked like a whip. "That is enough. Geoffrey's death was an accident. The inquest said so." Poirot raised a hand. "Madam, accidents can be arranged. Let us examine another accident." He opened his case and produced the green wool thread from the candlestick. This came from a scarf. Who owns such a scarf? Miss Pritchard gasped. Clara. She knitted it herself. Emerald green for Christmas. Clara was summoned. She entered wrapped in a shawl, eyes red-rimmed. I don't understand. My scarf is in my room. Show me, Poirot said gently. They trooped upstairs. Clara's room was a girl's haven. Chintz curtains, a doll's house, a piano littered with sheet music. On the bed lay the scarf, intact. Poirot examined it. The thread matches, but the scarf is whole. Someone took a snippet, perhaps to mislead. Clara began to cry. I loved Mr. Carstairs. He was going to help me publish my poems. Reginald snorted. Publish? With what, your pocket money? Stop it! Clara fled. Poirot turned to Miss Pritchard. You were close to Clara. Did she confide in Carstairs? The governess hesitated. She thought he could get her away from here, said the manor was a prison. Lunch was a travesty, cold cuts and silence. Afterward, Poirot slipped away to the conservatory, a glass cathedral of palms and orchids, the air thick with humidity. Victoria stood by a fountain, trailing her fingers in the water. Madam, Poirot said softly, you left the morning room in anger. Why? She did not turn. Because they're all liars. Reginald gambles away the estate. Mother-in-law clings to control. And Clara thinks poetry will save her. And you? I married into this mausoleum. Geoffrey promised me the world, then drowned chasing smugglers' brandy. The will leaves me a pittance unless I produce an heir. Reginald makes sure that doesn't happen. Poirot's eyes narrowed. You hate your husband? I hate what he's become. She faced him, eyes glittering. But I didn't kill Carstairs, though I won't pretend I'm sorry he's dead. At 3 o'clock, the second murder. Poirot was in the library with Japp, examining Carstairs' notebook under a magnifying glass, when a scream shattered the quiet. They ran to the drawing-room. Lady Eleanor's elderly sister, Miss Agatha Hawthorne, lay slumped in an armchair by the fire. Her face was purple, her eyes bulging. On the table beside her, an empty glass of elderflower cordial and a plate of sugared violets, half eaten. Poirot knelt, froth at the lips, the sweet smell of almonds. Cyanide, in the cordial or the sweets. On the carpet at her feet, a green glass ornament shattered. An emerald bauble painted with intertwining serpents, envy's emblem. Japp swore. Another one, and in front of half the household. Indeed, the room had been occupied minutes before. Colonel Bantry had stepped out for a cigar. Miss Pritchard had been arranging music. Jenkins had served the cordial at 2:45. Poirot picked up a shard. Inside the broken bauble, a slip of paper. Envy poisons the soul. Mon Dieu, he whispered. The killer grows bold. The house erupted. Doors slammed. Accusations flew. Reginald locked himself in the wine cellar with a bottle of claret. Victoria barricaded her room. Colonel Bantry loaded a shotgun for protection. Poirot gathered the staff in the servants' hall. The maid Agnes, small, freckled, terrified, confessed she had seen a figure in a dark cloak leaving Miss Agatha's room at 2:30. I thought it was Mrs. Victoria. She wears a green velvet cloak. Victoria, summoned, denied it. My cloak is in my wardrobe. See for yourselves. They did. The cloak hung innocently, but the hem was damp, melting snow. Someone borrowed it, Victoria said coldly, or framed me. Evening brought carolling, ghoulishly inappropriate, yet Lady Eleanor insisted. The villagers had arrived on foot, muffled in scarves, their lanterns glowing through the snow. They sang in the bleak midwinter, while police constables tramped overhead searching rooms. Poirot stood beneath the mistletoe in the hall, watching. Clara sang with desperate brightness. Miss Pritchard's hands shook on the piano. Reginald lurked in the shadows, glass in hand. As the villagers departed, Poirot caught Clara by the elbow. "Ma petite, you heard footsteps last night. Tell me exactly," she whispered. "After 2, light, quick, like a woman's. They stopped outside my door, then went toward the west wing. Miss Agatha's room." Poirot's eyes gleamed. The west wing, where the family portraits hung, and where a disused staircase led to the attic. Later, in his room, Poirot laid out the clues on the dressing table. Crimson bauble, truth, green bauble, envy, green wool thread, damp cloak, footprints to the icehouse Carstairs' note. Ask R about the will, V knows more. He stared at the shards until the fire burned low. Then, with a sudden movement, he took the emerald star from his pocket, the one he had removed from the tree. In its reflection, he saw not his face, but a pattern. The ornaments were being chosen to match the victim's sins. Carstairs, seeking truth, Miss Agatha, consumed by envy of her sister's wealth. Who next? Greed, pride, lust. Outside, the storm raged on, sealing them in with a killer who decorated death with Christmas glass. Poirot slipped the star into his waistcoat. Tomorrow, he would set a trap beneath the mistletoe. Chapter 4. The Angels Fall. The clock in the long gallery chimed midnight, its 12 notes falling like lead pellets into the hush of Hawthorne Manor. The storm had spent itself. Snow now drifted in lazy spirals past the windows, muffling the world outside. Inside, the house held its breath. 2 corpses lay in the cold store beneath the pantry. Felix Carstairs with his skull stoved in, Miss Agatha Hawthorne rigid with cyanide. The Christmas tree in the library stood sentinel over the scene, its remaining ornaments glittering like frost on a grave. Hercule Poirot had not slept. He sat in the wing chair by his bedroom fire, legs crossed, a small notebook open on his knee. On the page he had drawn 2 columns: victim ornament, sin Carstairs, crimson bauble, truth-seeking, Agatha emerald bauble envy. Beside the second entry he had added a question mark. Who next? The killer's pattern was clear, each death accompanied by a shattered ornament symbolizing the victim's fatal flaw. The glass was hand-blown, the symbols deliberate. Someone in the house had prepared these tokens months in advance, or had access to a private store. Poirot closed the notebook. The house was too quiet. Even the servants had ceased their whispering. He rose, donned his dressing gown, and slipped into the corridor. Moonlight spilled through the high windows, striping the carpet in silver bars. He moved like a shadow, past the west wing staircase where Clara had heard footsteps, past the nursery where Miss Pritchard slept with laudanum. At the head of the main stairs he paused. A faint sound, music, drifted up from below. The piano in the drawing-room. Someone was playing Silent Night, the notes hesitant, almost furtive. Poirot descended. The drawing-room door stood ajar. Candlelight flickered within. He pushed it open. Clara Hawthorne sat at the grand piano, her back to him, fingers stumbling over the keys. She wore a white nightgown, her dark hair loose about her shoulders. On the music stand lay a single sheet, her own composition, Nocturne for a Snowbound House. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said softly. She started, the melody fracturing. "Monsieur Poirot, I couldn't sleep. The house feels wrong." "You play to soothe the ghosts, or to wake them?" She closed the lid. Aunt Agatha used to say music kept evil at bay. I think she was wrong. Poirot crossed to the fireplace. The embers glowed. On the mantel stood a row of porcelain angels, their wings tipped with gold. One was missing. "Tell me about the gift exchange," he said. "Lady Eleanor mentioned it for midnight. Tomorrow, Christmas Eve." Clara's voice was small. "It's tradition. We draw lots for secret gifts. Nothing expensive, just tokens. Mine is for Miss Pritchard, a brooch shaped like a harp." "And yours from whom?" "I don't know. The lots are anonymous." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Interessant. Anonymous gifts, anonymous deaths." He was about to speak further when a scream, "High animal," ripped through the house. They found Mr. Percival Thorne in the billiard room, suspended from the chandelier by a length of crimson velvet curtain cord. The accountant's toes dangled 6 inches above the green baize table. His eyes bulged, his tongue protruded like a purple slug. Beneath him, on the felt, lay a shattered angel ornament, delicate spun glass, its wings broken, its halo cracked. A tiny scroll protruded from its hollow body. "Pride goeth before a fall." Poirot arrived with Japp, both in dressing gowns. The inspector swore fluently, "Strangled and strung up like a side of beef, and in a locked room." The door had been locked from the inside. The key lay on the floor beneath Thorne's dangling shoes. The windows were latched, the chimney too narrow for a cat. On the billiard table, balls were scattered as if a game had been interrupted. Thorne's cue lay snapped in two. Japp examined the cord. "Cut from the library curtains, fresh, done tonight." Poirot knelt beside the angel. The glass was thinner than the previous ornaments, almost eggshell. Inside the scroll, the handwriting matched the others, small, precise, vicious. "3 murders," Japp muttered, "and the night's not over." The household assembled in the hall, summoned by Jenkins' gong. Lady Eleanor appeared in a burgundy robe, her face chalk white. Reginald was unshaven, reeking of brandy. Victoria's eyes were red but dry. Colonel Bantry clutched his shotgun like a talisman. Miss Pritchard trembled so violently her teeth chattered. Poirot stood on the bottom step, a small figure commanding absolute attention. "Mesdames et messieurs, we have a third victim. Mr. Thorne, accountant to the Hawthorne estate for 15 years, found hanged in a locked room. The angel ornament, symbol of pride. Thorne was a proud man. He boasted of knowing where the bodies were buried, figuratively, until tonight." Reginald laughed, a cracked sound. "He knew where the money went, you mean? My money?" "Silence," Lady Eleanor's voice cracked. "Percival was loyal." "Was he?" Victoria's tone dripped acid. "He altered the ledgers after Geoffrey died. I have proof." The room erupted. Accusations ricocheted like bullets. Poirot raised a hand. "Enough! We will examine proof, but first, the locked room." He led them to the billiard room. Japp demonstrated. The door locked from inside, the key on the floor. No other exit. Poirot pointed to the chandelier. The cord was thrown over the beam, then the body hoisted. But observe, the cue. He lifted the broken halves, snapped under weight. Thorne was a slight man, 11 stone. The killer needed leverage. He moved to the fireplace. Above it hung a portrait of Sir Geoffrey in hunting pink. Poirot pressed the frame. It swung outward on hidden hinges, revealing a narrow passage. Voila! A priest's hole, used in Elizabethan times. It connects to the library and the west wing staircase. Japp whistled. So, the killer entered through the passage, strangled Thorne, staged the hanging, locked the door, and left the key to suggest suicide. Précisément. But why the angel? Thorne's pride was in his work, his infallible ledgers. Someone shattered that pride literally. Dawn brought grey light and more snow. Poirot and Japp searched the priest's hole. Dust lay thick, but fresh scuff marks showed recent passage. In the library end, They found a scrap of lace. Victoria's handkerchief monogrammed. Victoria, confronted, was icy. Anyone could have taken it. I mislaid it yesterday. In Thorne's room, they discovered ledgers hidden beneath a floorboard. Entries in red ink: RH of £5,000, Monte Carlo 1924, VH $2,000, Paris 1925. Forged signatures. Reginald paled when shown. Thorne was bleeding me dry. I paid to keep it quiet. And Miss Agatha? Poirot asked. She knew. Threatened to tell Mother unless I settled her debts. Lady Eleanor wept silently. My sister, always envious, and Percival greedy, but murder? At noon, Poirot gathered the suspects in the long gallery. Portraits glared down. He placed the broken angel on a table beside the crimson and emerald shards. 3 deaths, 3 ornaments. The killer is among us, choosing victims by their sins. But the ornaments come from the tree. Someone removes them in advance. He produced a list. Last night, after carolling, the tree was unguarded for 20 minutes. Who was missing? Jenkins spoke. Mr. Reginald went to the cellar. Mrs. Victoria to the conservatory. Miss Pritchard to the nursery. Colonel Bantry to the gun-room. Poirot nodded. And the governess, Miss Pritchard. You were seen near the west wing staircase at 11:45. The woman gasped. I went to check on Clara. She was restless. Clara corroborated. She tucked me in, then left. Poirot's eyes flicked to Colonel Bantry. You loaded your shotgun. Why? Protection, dash it. Man's got a right to defend his friends. Or to silence them. The colonel bristled. See here, you little... Poirot cut him off. Observe the angel's wings. One is missing a feather. He held up a tiny glass shard found in the priest's hole. It matches. The killer brushed against the wall. Tea was served in the morning room. Sandwiches untouched. Poirot slipped away to the attic. The servants' quarters were cramped, smelling of lye and damp. In Miss Pritchard's room, he found a locked trunk. Forcing it, he discovered a box of glass ornaments, identical to those on the tree but unpainted. A jeweller's loop, a bottle of gold paint, a glass cutter. Downstairs, chaos. A footman burst in. The governess, she's gone. They found Miss Pritchard in the old chapel, a dagger at her throat, her own hand trembling. I can't bear it, she sobbed. They'll hang me. Poirot approached slowly. Mademoiselle, put down the knife. You are not the killer. She stared. But the ornaments, I made them. For Clara's Christmas pageant last year. Anyone could have taken them. Poirot took the dagger. Oui, anyone. Evening, the gift exchange was cancelled. Instead, the tree was stripped of its remaining ornaments, locked in the safe. Poirot stood before the bare branches. The killer is frustrated. The next ornament is chosen, but cannot be used. Japp grunted. So we wait? We set a trap. Poirot's smile was tigerish. Tomorrow is Christmas Eve. The killer will strike at midnight, when the house is drunk on punch and sentiment. We will give them a gift they cannot refuse. He placed a single ornament on the table, an intact glass star, glittering with promise. Let us see who reaches for the star of betrayal. Outside, the snow began again, soft and deadly. Inside, the manor waited for the next fall. Chapter 5. Whispers in the Snow. The lull came at 3:30 in the afternoon, a treacherous pause between blizzards. The wind dropped. The snowflakes grew fat and languid, drifting like feathers from a ruptured pillow. In the sudden hush, Hawthorne Manor seemed to listen to itself. Creaking joists, ticking clocks, the soft thud of a log settling in the grate. Hercule Poirot stood at the French windows of the morning room, hands clasped behind his back. The garden lay under a shroud 2 feet deep. The rose arbour had vanished, The sundial wore a sugarloaf cap. Yet, in the middle distance, almost lost among the drifts, a single line of footprints marred the perfection, small, neat, purposeful. They began at the kitchen door, crossed the terrace, and disappeared into the white anonymity beyond the yew hedge. Poirot's breath fogged the pane. Ah, enfin, the killer grows careless. Inspector Japp joined him, pipe clenched between his teeth. Those prints weren't there an hour ago. Someone's been out in the last 30 minutes. Précisément. And they return? How? Poirot scanned the expanse. No second set of prints led back. Either our visitor flies, or he knows a path beneath the snow. Japp grunted. The ice house! There's an old tunnel from the cellars, used for smuggling brandy in the last century. Comes up inside the shed yonder. Poirot's eyes sparkled. Mon ami, you have the nose of a bloodhound. Come. They donned coats and galoshes. The cold struck like a slap. The air tasted of iron. Poirot led the way, testing each step with his cane. The footprints were indeed small, size 5, perhaps 6, a woman's or a slight man's. At the yew hedge, they vanished beneath an arch of snow-laden branches. Beyond lay the kitchen garden, its walls half buried. A low brick shed crouched at the far end, its door ajar. Snow had drifted across the threshold, but the prints reappeared inside, leading to a trapdoor in the floor. Japp hauled it open. Stone steps descended into darkness. The air that rose was damp, earthy, laced with the faint sweetness of apples stored the previous autumn. A lantern hung on a nail. Japp lit it. The tunnel was narrow, brick-vaulted, barely high enough for a man to walk upright. Their shadows danced like goblins on the walls. 50 yards in, the passage widened into a chamber. Sacking-covered crates lined the walls. Brandy, Poirot noted, smuggled labels still visible. In the centre stood a deal table. Upon it, a paraffin stove, still warm, a kettle, a chipped mug, and, most significantly, a wooden box lined with velvet. Inside nestled 6 glass ornaments, each wrapped in tissue. Poirot lifted one, a golden star, its points sharp as daggers. A slip of paper lay beneath, betrayal. Japp whistled. The killer's workshop. Poirot examined the stove. Used within the hour. Our visitor brewed tea, très anglais, then departed, but why risk exposure in daylight? He opened a second box. Inside, shards of the previous ornaments, carefully sorted by colour. A glass cutter, gold paint, a fine brush, and a notebook, small, leather-bound, its pages filled with cramped handwriting. Poirot read aloud. Crimson, truth, Carstairs emerald, envy, Agatha white, pride, thorn gold, betrayal, silver, greed, sapphire, lust. 6 planned, Japp muttered. Half the household. Poirot turned the page. A sketch of the Christmas tree, each doomed ornament marked with a cross. Beneath, a single line. They took everything, now I take them. Footsteps echoed behind them, light, hurried. Japp swung the lantern. Clara Hawthorne stood at the tunnel mouth, wrapped in a fur coat 2 sizes too large, cheeks scarlet with cold. I followed the prince, she stammered. I thought it might be Miss Pritchard. She's been acting strangely. Poirot's gaze was gentle, but implacable. Mademoiselle, you should not be here. Return to the house. Inspector Japp will escort you. Clara hesitated, then obeyed. As her footsteps faded, Poirot pocketed the notebook. Back in the manor, the atmosphere had curdled. The drawing-room smelled of fear and unwashed bodies. Colonel Bantry had stationed himself at the gun cabinet, shotgun across his knees. Reginald paced, glass in hand, muttering about damned journalists and their poison pens. Victoria sat by the window, staring at the snow as though it might offer escape. Lady Eleanor had taken to her bed. Miss Pritchard hovered outside her door like a worried sparrow. Poirot gathered them in the evil library. The tree stood bare, its branches skeletal. On the table lay the golden star from the tunnel. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "the killer has a workshop beneath our feet. 6 ornaments prepared. 3 used, 3 remain. The next victim is marked for betrayal." Reginald sneered. "Betrayal? That could be any of us. This family's built on it." "Oui, but betrayal requires trust. Who was trusted above all others?" Silence. Then Victoria spoke, voice low. "Geoffrey's secretary, Thorne. He knew every secret. And Miss Pritchard, she raised the children. Even Agnes the maid has been here 20 years. Poirot nodded. "Trust is the thread. Observe." He produced the green wool thread from the first murder. This came from Clara's scarf, but the scarf was whole. Someone cut a snippet to mislead. Similarly, Victoria's cloak was damp, yet she was indoors. The killer borrows, impersonates, confuses. Colonel Bantry growled. "You're saying one of us is playing dress-up?" "Précisément. A master of disguise, or a servant with access to every wardrobe." Jenkins entered, face grim. "Sir, the telephone lines are down. The village is cut off, and there's been an incident." They found Miss Pritchard in the schoolroom, wrists slashed, blood soaking the blotter on her desk. She was alive, barely. A note lay beside her. "I cannot bear the guilt." Poirot knelt, staunching the wounds with his handkerchief. "Mademoiselle, you are not guilty. You are bait." Her eyes fluttered. "The ornaments! I made them for the children. Someone stole the blanks, painted them. I thought it was my fault." Japp summoned the doctor, a harassed local GP who had skied in on improvised planks. While Miss Pritchard was carried to her room, Poirot examined the desk. The razor was Thorne's, monogrammed. The note was in Miss Pritchard's hand, but the ink was fresh, the pen still wet. "Forced confession," Poirot murmured. "The killer grows desperate. The storm isolates us, but it also traps them. They strike at the weak to deflect suspicion." Evening, the house settled into an uneasy truce. Fires were banked high, doors locked. Poirot and Japp took turns patrolling the corridors. At 10 o'clock, a scream echoed from the conservatory. They arrived to find Victoria pinned against the glass by Reginald, his hands about her throat. Colonel Bantry wrestled him off. The younger man collapsed, sobbing. "She's been meeting someone," Reginald gasped. "In the ice house. I saw her from the window." Victoria's lip was split, blood bright against her skin. "Liar! You're drunk." Poirot's voice cut through the chaos. "Assez! We will examine the ice house, together." They trudged through the snow, lanterns swinging. The tunnel entrance was undisturbed, but inside the chamber, the paraffin stove had been overturned. Kerosene soaked the floor. The box of ornaments was gone. Japp swore. "Burned? No." Poirot pointed to drag marks in the dust. "Taken." The killer panicked. Back in the manor, Poirot assembled the household in the hall. The golden star lay on the table, gleaming. Écoutez, the killer needed the remaining ornaments. They took them from the tunnel, risking discovery. "Why?" Clara whispered. "Because the tree is bare. They can't leave their signature." "Exactement. The ornaments are the message. Without them, the deaths are mere murders. With them, they are judgment." He turned to Reginald. "You saw Victoria in the ice house." "I saw a woman, cloaked. It could have been anyone." Victoria touched her throat. "I was in the conservatory, reading, alone." Poirot's gaze swept the room. "Someone lies, but the snow remembers." Midnight. Poirot stood alone in the library, the golden star in his hand. He had dismissed Jap to watch the west wing staircase. The house slept, or pretended to. A soft click. The priest's hole opened. A figure emerged, cloaked in black, face obscured by a silk scarf. They moved with purpose to the table, reaching for the star. Poirot stepped from the shadows. "Bonsoir, you are punctual." The figure whirled. For a moment they froze, then lunged. Poirot sidestepped. The star shattered on the floor, gold dust glittering like mica. A struggle, brief, vicious. The cloak tore, the scarf slipped. Clara Hawthorne stared at him, eyes wild, a shard of glass raised like a dagger. "Ma petite," Poirot said softly. "It is finished." She collapsed, sobbing. "They took everything from me. My poems, my future. Carstairs promised to help, but he only wanted scandal. Aunt Agatha mocked me. Thorne said I was a drain on the estate. I wanted them to feel what it's like to be broken." Poirot knelt, gathering the shards. "You painted the sins you saw in others. But the greatest sin was yours. Betrayal of trust. Your grandmother loved you." Upstairs, footsteps thundered. Jap burst in with constables. Clara was led away, still weeping. Poirot stood amid the wreckage of gold glass. Outside, the snow had stopped. Stars pierced the sky like shards of ice. Christmas Eve was hours away, and the manor's ornaments lay in ruins. But the killer was caught. Or was she? Poirot's gaze fell on the priest's hole. A single emerald thread, identical to Clara's scarf, lay caught on a nail. Clara had been wearing blue tonight. His little grey cells stirred uneasily. The footprints had been small, yes, but deliberate. And the notebook, the handwriting was not a girl's. Somewhere in the house, a door closed softly. The whispers in the snow had not yet fallen silent. Chapter 6. The Star of Betrayal. The grandfather clock in the entrance hall had just tolled 2 when Hercule Poirot re-entered the library alone. The golden shards of the star lay where Clara had dropped them, glittering like spilled coins in the firelight. Jap had taken the girl away, still weeping, still protesting, but Poirot's moustaches remained stiff with doubt. The emerald thread on the priest's whole nail was wrong. Clara's scarf was sapphire wool. The thread was the exact shade of the one found on the candlestick after Carstairs' murder. Someone had planted it, just as someone had planted the razor in Miss Pritchard's hand. Poirot locked the library door, drew the curtains, and knelt among the fragments. With tweezers, he lifted each piece, fitting them together on the blotter like a child's puzzle. The star reformed, 8 points, a central disc, and, newly revealed, a hairline crack running from tip to tip. Inside the hollow centre, something glinted. He eased it out, a thin silver needle, no longer than a sewing pin, its tip blackened with dried blood. "Tiens," he breathed, "the weapon that pricked Miss Pritchard's conscience, and her wrists." He sniffed the needle. Almonds, cyanide, diluted. Enough to wound, not to kill. The governess had been meant to bleed slowly, to confess under duress. Clara, for all her rage, lacked the precision for such theatre. Poirot rose. The house was silent, yet he felt watched. He moved to the Christmas tree, now stripped bare, its branches skeletal against the window. On the highest bough, almost invisible, hung a single ornament he had missed. A silver star, smaller than the others, its surface etched with tiny mirrors. He unhooked it carefully. Reflected in each facet was a different room of the manor, distorted but unmistakable. A spy's toy. Footsteps overhead, soft, deliberate. Poirot slipped the silver star into his pocket and glided to the priest's hole. The passage was dark, but a faint glow emanated from the far end. He followed it. cane tapping silently on the stone. The passage opened into the old nursery. Moonlight filtered through the barred window, illuminating a scene of calculated chaos. The rocking horse lay on its side. Dolls stared with painted eyes. On the table sat the wooden box from the icehouse tunnel, open, empty. The remaining 3 ornaments were gone. A shadow detached itself from the wardrobe. Miss Pritchard stepped forward, bandaged wrists stark against her black dressing gown. Her eyes were clear, her voice steady. "You were right, Monsieur Poirot. I am not the killer, but I know who is." They spoke in whispers. Miss Pritchard had feigned sleep after the doctor left, then slipped out to search for the ornaments. She had found the box in the nursery, her old domain, and heard someone descending the back stairs. "It was Agnes," she said, "the maid. She had the box. She saw me and ran toward the west wing." "Agnes?" Poirot's brow furrowed. "The frightened girl from the first night." "She is not frightened. She is furious. 20 years in this house, watching the family squander what her mother, Lady Eleanor's own sister, built. Agnes is illegitimate. Sir Geoffrey acknowledged her, privately, promised her a share. Then he drowned, and the will forgot her." Poirot nodded slowly. "Betrayal. The star was meant for her, or by her." They moved together through the sleeping house. The west wing corridor was icy. Frost feathered the windows. At the end, a door stood ajar, the late Sir Geoffrey's study, untouched since his death. Inside, candlelight flickered. Agnes stood at the desk, back to them, arranging the 3 remaining ornaments on a velvet cloth. Silver for greed, sapphire for lust, and a final one, black glass shaped like a tear. Grief, Poirot thought, or vengeance. The maid turned. Her face was calm, almost serene. In her hand, she held a small revolver. Sir Geoffrey's service pistol. "Stay back," she said quietly. "It's Christmas morning soon, time for the last gifts." Poirot stepped forward, hands raised. "Ma petite, you have suffered, but murder is not justice." "Justice?" Agnes laughed, a sound like breaking ice. "They took my name, my inheritance, my mother's memory." Carstairs dug too deep. He found the letters Geoffrey wrote to Mother. Agatha mocked me in the servants' hall, called me the bastard under the stairs. Thorne altered the ledgers to erase me entirely. And Clara, her voice cracked, Clara was going to expose everything in her poems. I gave her the star to silence her. Miss Pritchard gasped. "You used the child." "I loved the child. That is why I had to stop her." Poirot's eyes never left the gun. "The ornaments, your mother's craft." Agnes nodded. "She was a glassblower's daughter. Taught me. Every year I made the trees decorations. This year I painted their sins." She lifted the silver ornament, greed. "For Reginald. He gambles away what should have been mine." The sapphire, lust. "For Victoria. She seduced Geoffrey, then discarded him." The black tear. "For Lady Eleanor. She knew. She always knew." Poirot took another step. "And the footprints, the tunnel? I waited for the lull. The storm hid me. But Clara followed. She always follows. I staged her confession to buy time." The revolver wavered. Miss Pritchard moved to the door, blocking escape. Poirot spoke softly. "Agnes, put down the gun. Your mother would not want this." For a moment, the maid hesitated. Then the clock struck 3. Somewhere below, a door slammed. Jap, returning from the village with reinforcements. Agnes's face hardened. Too late. She raised the gun, not at Poirot, but at the ornaments. One shot. The silver star exploded into 1,000 fragments. A second shot, the sapphire. The black tear shattered last, its pieces scattering like dark snow. Agnes dropped the revolver and sank to her knees amid the wreckage. "Now they are all broken," she whispered, "like me." Dawn crept over the manor, pale and pitiless. The storm had passed, the sky was the colour of skimmed milk. Constables tramped through the halls, taking statements. Clara, released, sat in the morning room with Miss Pritchard, both weeping quietly. Reginald stared out at the snow, face grey. Victoria smoked a cigarette with shaking fingers. Colonel Bantry had locked himself in the gun-room, muttering about damned women. Lady Eleanor received the news in her bedroom. She did not cry. She simply opened a drawer and took out a miniature portrait. Sir Geoffrey, young and smiling, with a dark-haired woman at his side. On the back, in faded ink, "To my darling M, forever." She rang for Jenkins. "Burn the tree," she said, "every branch. I never want to see another ornament in this house." Poirot stood in the study, watching the constables lead Agnes away. She did not resist. At the door, she paused. "Monsieur Poirot, did I do wrong?" He considered. "You did evil to punish evil. That is always wrong, but you are not beyond redemption." She nodded once, then was gone, Christmas morning. The village choir arrived on sledges, their voices rising in "Hark! The herald angels sing." The family gathered in the hall out of habit, not joy. No gifts were exchanged. The bare tree smouldered in the courtyard, its ashes drifting like grey snow. Poirot prepared to leave. His valise was packed. The Daimler waited. Japp clapped him on the shoulder. "Another case closed, eh? Though I'll be damned if I understand the women in this house." Poirot smiled faintly. "Mon ami, the heart is a fragile ornament. Some polish it with love. Others shatter it with hate." As the car pulled away, he glanced back. Hawthorne Manor stood against the white hills, its chimneys smoking, its windows blind. In the wreckage of the study, a single shard of black glass caught the light, a tear, frozen forever. Poirot closed his eyes. The star of betrayal had fallen. But in its place, a small, hard truth glittered. Some crimes are born not of greed or lust, but of love turned inside out. The manor dwindled in the rear window. Somewhere behind him, a clock struck 6. Christmas Day had begun, but the season's chill would linger long after the snow melted. Chapter 7. Ornaments of Deception. The sun rose on Christmas morning like a blood-orange disk, low and reluctant, as if it, too, wished to turn its face from Hawthorne Manor. The snow had ceased entirely. The world lay stunned into stillness. Constables in heavy boots crunched across the courtyard, their breath pluming white. The Daimler that had brought Poirot stood ready, engine ticking as it cooled, but Poirot had not left. Something itched at the back of his skull, a splinter of glass too small to see yet impossible to ignore. Agnes had confessed. The ornaments were destroyed. The revolver was catalogued, the tunnel sealed, the priest's hole bricked up by 2 sweating village masons before breakfast. Yet Poirot lingered in the library alone, staring at the scorched patch on the Persian rug where Carstairs had died. The stain had darkened to the colour of dried violets. He knelt, touched it with a gloved finger, then rose and opened the French windows. Cold air rushed in, sharp as gin. He stepped onto the terrace. The snow was crisp, unmarked except for the constable's boot prints and the narrow track of a sled that had delivered milk at dawn. Poirot followed the terrace to the corner, where the library windows met the morning-room wall. There, half buried in a drift, lay a single shard of glass, black, teardrop-shaped, no larger than a thumbnail. The final piece of Agnes's tear ornament. or so everyone believed. Poirot wrapped it in his handkerchief and returned inside. He locked the windows, drew the curtains, and laid the shard on the blotter beside the reconstructed star. The silver needle, the emerald thread, the golden dust, everything in its place, everything except the rhythm of the crimes. He opened his notebook and wrote in his neat, continental hand, Carstairs, crimson, truth Agatha, emerald, envy thorn, white, pride. Clara, attempt, gold, betrayal. Pritchard, attempt, silver needle, despair. Agnes, self-confessed, black, grief. 6 ornaments, 6 sins. Yet the sequence felt incomplete. A symphony missing its final movement. A soft knock. Inspector Japp entered, rubbing red hands. The girl's on her way to the station. Lady Eleanor's given her a character, loyal service, tragic circumstances. The press will lap it up. You coming, Poirot? Non, 1 more hour, mon ami. The house has not finished speaking. Japp shrugged. Suit yourself. I'll be in the kitchen. Cook's doing bacon. Poirot moved through the manor like a ghost. In the long gallery, he found Victoria alone, wrapped in sable, staring at the portrait of Sir Geoffrey. You should have left with the others, she said without turning. Madame, I leave when the puzzle is complete. Tell me, why did you go to the icehouse tunnel on the night of the storm? She faced him, eyes glittering. I didn't. Your cloak was damp. Your handkerchief was in the priest's hole. You quarrelled with Reginald in the conservatory. Reginald is a drunk and a fool. He saw shadows. She lit a cigarette with steady fingers. But if you must know, I went to destroy the ledgers Thorn hid. I burned them in the stove. The ornaments were already gone. Poirot studied her. You burned evidence of embezzlement, yours or your husband's. Both. We are equally guilty, equally innocent of murder. He nodded, filed the information, moved on. In the servants' hall, Jenkins poured tea with the solemnity of a priest dispensing communion. The maids sat in a semicircle, eyes downcast. Agnes's empty chair gaped like a missing tooth. Jenkins, Poirot said, on the night Carstairs died, you locked the baize door at 11. Yet someone entered the library after midnight. How? The butler's face was stone. I cannot say. Sir, the key never left my pocket. Show me. Jenkins produced a heavy iron key on a ribbon. Poirot examined it. Scratches around the wards, fresh. A duplicate, made recently. Who has access to the key cupboard? Only myself and Lady Eleanor. Upstairs, Lady Eleanor sat at her dressing table, pearls in her lap like a rosary. She did not look up when Poirot entered. You have taken Agnes from me, she said quietly. Madame, she took 3 lives. She was my husband's child, I knew. I protected her. When Geoffrey died, I altered the will myself, left her nothing. I thought it kindness, to keep her close, safe, beneath notice. Poirot's voice was gentle. You kept her in servitude. I kept her alive. Lady Eleanor's eyes met his in the mirror. There is a difference. He placed the black shard on the table. This was found outside. Agnes destroyed the ornaments in the study. How did this piece travel 30 yards through locked doors? For the first time, the old woman faltered. I do not know. The schoolroom. Miss Pritchard was packing Clara's books into a trunk. The girl herself sat on the window seat, knees drawn up, staring at the snow. Mademoiselle Pritchard, Poirot said, the razor that cut your wrists, was it Thorn's? She nodded. I recognized the monogram. It went missing after his death. And the note? Your handwriting, but the ink? Waterman's black. I use blue. Clara spoke without turning. Someone guided my hand while I slept. I dreamed of stars falling. Poirot crouched beside her. Ma petite, on the night of the Golden Star, you entered the library through the priest's hole. You shattered the ornament, but you did not bring the needle. Someone waited in the shadows, took the shard, used it later on, Miss Pritchard. Clara's eyes filled. I wanted to stop the murders. I thought if I broke the star, the pattern would end. Poirot patted her hand. You were brave and deceived. The conservatory. Colonel Bantry stood among the palms, shotgun broken over his arm. Still here, Poirot. Thought you'd be halfway to London by now. Mon Colonel, you were Sir Geoffrey's oldest friend. You knew of the child. Bantry's jaw worked. Knew and kept silent. Geoffrey begged me. Said the scandal would ruin Eleanor. I owed him my life. Gallipoli, 16, 1 bullet, 2 men. He took it in the shoulder. I kept my head. And the will. I witnessed the codicil. Agnes was to have £10,000 and a cottage. Eleanor tore it up after the funeral. Said the girl was better off ignorant. Poirot's eyes narrowed. You disapproved. I disapproved of murder more. When Carstairs started sniffing, I warned him off. He laughed. Then he died. The billiard room. Reginald nursed a brandy, cue in hand, balls untouched. You've ruined Christmas, Poirot. Monsieur, Christmas was ruined long before I arrived. Tell me about the duplicate key. Reginald smirked. Jenkins is loyal to Mother. I bribed the locksmith in Lower Hawthorne. Paid him in IOUs. Needed access to the wine cellar without the old man counting bottles. You entered the library the night Carstairs died. Briefly, found him already dead, panicked, left. Poirot's voice was silk over steel. You moved the body. No, but I took his notebook, burned it in the kitchen range. Didn't want my gambling debts in the papers. The pieces slotted together with a soft, inevitable click. Poirot returned to the library and locked the door. He opened the priest's hole, descended to the tunnel, and followed it to the ice-house chamber. The paraffin stove was cold, but the kettle held a residue of tea, Earl Grey, 2 sugars, Agnes's preference. Yet on the table lay a fresh imprint in the dust, the outline of a small, rectangular box. Someone had removed something after Agnes's arrest. He climbed the steps to the shed. Outside, the snow was melting in patches. Water dripped from the eaves. Near the door, half covered by a drift, lay a child's mitten, Clara's, initialed in red wool. Inside the cuff, a folded slip of paper. Meet me at the chapel. Midnight. Bring the black tear. A. Agnes had never written this. The handwriting was spidery, elderly, Lady Eleanor's, midday. The house stirred to life. The village choir had departed. The constables prepared to leave with their prisoner. Poirot gathered everyone in the drawing-room, family, staff, Jap. The fire roared. The bare tree loomed in the corner like a gallows. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, we have been deceived by a master of misdirection. Agnes believed she acted alone. She prepared the ornaments, chose the sins, struck the blows, but she was a puppet. The strings were pulled by one who knew every secret, every passage, every heart. He placed the black shard on the table. This piece was planted outside after Agnes's confession. Someone wished us to believe the story complete. Lady Eleanor rose, regal in black velvet. You accuse me? Madame, I accuse you of love turned to poison. You protected Agnes by sacrificing her. You forged the note in Clara's mitten, lured the girl to the chapel, planned to stage her suicide with the final ornament. A tragic end to a tragic tale. The old woman's face crumpled. She was going to hang. I could not bear it. Victoria gasped. Reginald swore. Colonel Bantry levelled the shotgun, not at Poirot, but at Lady Eleanor. Eleanor, you damned fool! Poirot continued, relentless. You entered the library through the priest's hole the night Carstairs died. You struck the blow, smashed the bauble, left the candlestick. Agnes followed, saw the body, believed herself the killer, her ornament, her sin. You encouraged the delusion. Each subsequent murder, you guided her hand, then covered the traces. Lady Eleanor sank into a chair. Geoffrey's death broke me. When Carstairs threatened to expose Agnes, I saw ruin. I thought, if the murders seemed the work of a mad servant, the family would be spared. Japp stepped forward, handcuffs ready. Lady Eleanor Hawthorne, I arrest you. She raised a trembling hand. From her sleeve slid a tiny derringer, pearl-handled, antique. No, I will not be caged. Colonel Bantry lunged. The gun fired. Plaster exploded from the ceiling. In the chaos, Lady Eleanor pressed the barrel to her temple. Poirot's voice cut through the din. Madame, your husband forgave you once. Forgive yourself. For a long moment, the room held its breath. Then the derringer clattered to the rug. Lady Eleanor wept, silent, shattering sobs that shook her frail frame. Epilogue to the chapter. Outside, the snow began to melt in earnest. Water dripped from the gutters like slow tears. The constables took Lady Eleanor away in the Daimler, her head high, pearls gleaming against the grey morning. Agnes was released into Miss Pritchard's care. Probation, psychiatric evaluation, a cottage in Devon paid for by an anonymous benefactor, Colonel Bantry's conscience. Poirot stood on the terrace, watching the car disappear down the drive. Japp joined him, offering a flask. Merry Christmas, Poirot! Mon ami, Christmas is the season of truth. Today we have had our fill. Behind them, the manor's windows reflected the pale sun, empty, ornamentless, waiting for spring. Poirot raised the flask to shattered glass and the light that remains. They drank. The snow continued to melt, carrying the last whispers of deception into the earth. Chapter 8. The Silent Night Intruder. The thaw set in with indecent haste. By noon on Christmas Day, the snow on the south-facing slopes had turned to slush. Rivulets ran from the eaves like tears from a grieving widow. The courtyard was a mire of churned mud and boot prints. The Daimler carrying Lady Eleanor and the constables had vanished down the lane hours ago, leaving only twin ruts that filled slowly with brown water. Inside Hawthorne Manor, the silence was not peace. It was the hush after a bomb. Hercule Poirot stood in the entrance hall, valise in hand, overcoat buttoned to the throat. Inspector Japp waited by the door, stamping cold feet. Train leaves Lower Hawthorne at 3, Japp said. We'll just make it if we start now. Poirot did not move. His gaze was fixed on the Christmas tree, or what remained of it. The charred branches had been dragged in from the courtyard and propped in a corner like a blackened skeleton. A single ornament clung to the topmost twig. A tiny glass icicle, miraculously intact, catching the weak light and throwing it back in fractured spears. Un moment, Poirot murmured. The house has one more secret. Japp groaned. Poirot, the old lady confessed. Agnes is cleared. The case is closed tighter than a miser's purse. No, closed, yes, but not sealed. Observe the icicle. It was not on the tree yesterday. Someone placed it there after the burning. He crossed to the tree, unhooked the icicle with delicate fingers. It was heavier than glass should be. Inside, a thin roll of paper was visible, coiled like a snail. Japp leaned in. Another message. Poirot eased the paper free. The handwriting was spidery, urgent. The chandelier remembers. Look up. They looked. Above the hall, the great crystal chandelier hung motionless, its pendants dulled with dust. In the exact centre, one drop was missing, replaced by a small, dark object. Mon Dieu, Poirot breathed. The final ornament. They fetched a library ladder. Japp climbed grumbling, while Poirot steadied the rungs. The object was a miniature glass coffin, no longer than a thumb, containing a tiny silver skeleton. A tag hung from it. Death waits for all. Japp descended, face grim. Who the devil put this up there? The chandelier hasn't been touched since the murders began. Poirot turned the coffin in his fingers. Someone who knew the house's bones. Someone who could climb unseen. But why now? The killer is gone. A voice from the staircase, Clara Hawthorne, pale in a grey frock. It wasn't there this morning. I would have seen it when I passed with Miss Pritchard. Miss Pritchard herself appeared, clutching a shawl. The chandelier was cleaned last week, by Agnes and the housemaids. They used the service stairs behind the tapestry. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The service stairs, of course. They followed the narrow staircase behind the arras, a corkscrew of stone worn smooth by generations of silent feet. It emerged in the attic, a cavern of trunks and cobwebs. Dust lay thick, but a path had been trodden recently, footprints small and neat, leading to a dormer window. The window was unlatched. Outside, the roof sloped steeply to the gutter. Snow had melted from the slates, leaving them slick and black. A rope, thin, strong, knotted to the chimney stack, dangled over the edge. Japp whistled. Someone's been playing cat burglar. Poirot leaned out. The rope ended 10 feet above the ground, directly over the kitchen yard. Below, a patch of snow had been disturbed. Footprints led to the scullery door. Précisément, the silent night intruder, not to enter, but to exit. In the kitchen, Cook was kneading dough with the fury of a woman wronged. The scullery door stood ajar. Snow had drifted across the threshold. Anyone come through here? Japp barked. Cook wiped flour from her hands. Not a soul. I've been here since dawn, though, she hesitated, there was a noise last night, around 2, like a cat on the tiles. I thought it was the wind. Poirot examined the door. The lock was scratched, new marks made by a pick. Inside, a trail of melting snow led to the pantry. On the shelf, a tin of rat poison was open, half empty. Beside it, a glass vial. Empty, labelled laudanum. Tiens, the attempts on Miss Pritchard and Clara. Poison prepared in advance, stored here. The intruder returned to remove evidence. Japp scratched his head, but Lady Eleanor confessed. She couldn't climb a rope at her age. No, she confessed to guiding Agnes. But the ornaments, the messages, the precision, those were not the work of an old woman's trembling hands. Someone else orchestrated the symphony. Lady Eleanor was the conductor. The violinist played alone. They searched the attic thoroughly. Behind a trunk of moth-eaten theatrical costumes, they found a small leather case. Inside, a black silk rope ladder, a set of lockpicks, a tiny blowpipe with poisoned darts, and, most damning, a diary bound in red morocco. The entries were in a neat clerk's hand. Deck 10. Ornaments painted, sins assigned. C to learn truth. Deck 15. C asks too many questions. Bauble prepared. Deck 20. Envious of E's pearls. Emerald ready. Deck 22. T boasts of ledgers. Angel for pride. Deck 23. Clara suspects. Star to silence her. Deck 24. Pritchard knows too much. Needle for despair. Deck 25. E confesses. Perfect. I vanish. Coffin for the house. The final entry, dated that morning. Rope to roof. Evidence burned. Train at 3. By the time they read this, I'll be in Paris. The Hawthorns will pay for Geoffrey's betrayal forever. Poirot closed the diary. Mon ami, we have our intruder. But who is I? Japp flipped to the frontispiece. A name was inscribed in faded ink. Percival Thorne? Thorne? Japp stared. But Thorne's dead, hanged in the billiard room. Non, a hanged man. But was it Thorn? They exhumed the coffin from the cold store. The body was slight, the face battered by the hanging, but the hands, Poirot noted, were smooth, uncalloused. Thorn's ledgers had shown ink stains on the right forefinger. This corpse had none. Japp swore. A substitute, but who? Poirot's mind raced. The accountant was slight, 11 stone. The rope was cut from the library curtains. The priest's hole connects to the billiard room. Someone entered, strangled the victim, hoisted the body, locked the door, and left through the passage. But the angel ornament was in the victim's hand, placed there after death. He turned to Clara. "Ma petite, you said Thorn was going to help you publish your poems. Did he show you a photograph? A locket?" Clara nodded slowly. "A miniature. His brother, lost at sea. He wore it always. The corpse in the cold store wore no locket. The pieces fell into place with a sound like breaking ice." Percival Thorn had a twin brother, Philip, disgraced, presumed drowned in a smuggling venture with Sir Geoffrey. Philip had survived, hidden, nursed by a fisherman's family. When Percival summoned him to Hawthorne Manor to help falsify the ledgers, Philip saw his chance. He killed his brother, took his place, and began the Ornament murders, each sin a mirror of the family's betrayal of his survival. "Carstairs threatened to expose the smuggling," Poirot said. Agatha knew of the twin. Thorn, Percival, boasted of the ledgers. Clara's poems would reveal the family's shame. Miss Pritchard recognized the impostor. Lady Eleanor, in her guilt, took the blame to protect the house. Japp was already moving. "The 3 o'clock train!" They ran to the stables. The groom saddled 2 horses, Poirot's first ride in years, but urgency overrode dignity. They galloped down the lane, mud flying, the manor shrinking behind them. Lower Hawthorne Station was a single platform, deserted except for a porter and a plume of steam. The train stood waiting, doors open. Philip Thorn stood on the step of the first-class carriage, valise in hand, Homburg hat pulled low. He saw them, dropped the case, and sprinted along the platform. Japp tackled him at the edge. Thorn fought like a cornered stoat, kicking, biting, clawing. Poirot arrived panting, cane raised. "Assez!" he cried. "Philip Thorn, you are under arrest for the murders of Felix Carstairs, Agatha Hawthorne, and your brother Percival." Thorn went limp. "He was weak," he spat. "Took their money, forgot our blood. They left me to drown. I gave them ornaments to match their souls." The porter gaped. The train whistle shrieked. Doors slammed. With a hiss of steam, the London Express pulled away, empty. Back at the manor, the truth unfolded like a dark flower. Philip had entered through the roof, using the rope ladder stored in the attic. He had poisoned the cordial, rigged the chandelier in the billiard room, a falling hazard waiting for the right moment, planted the ornaments, and framed Agnes with her own craftsmanship. Lady Eleanor, discovering the deception, had confessed to shield the family name, believing Agnes the true killer. Clara found the locket in the attic. Philip had dropped it in his haste. Inside, a faded photograph of 2 identical boys, arms about each other, smiling at the sea. Evening, the house was quiet, the fires banked low. Poirot stood in the hall, the glass coffin in his palm. The silver skeleton glinted. Japp clapped him on the shoulder. "Another miracle, Poirot! How did you know?" "Mon ami," the chandelier remembered. "It was cleaned after the murders began. Yet the coffin was placed today. Only someone who knew the house's heights and depths could do it." And the diary, Thorn's clerk hand, but the entries continued after his death. The silent night intruder was never silent. He was the echo of a drowned man. Outside, the last snow melted into the earth. The icicle ornament lay shattered on the hall tiles, its water pooling like tears. Poirot raised his hat. "Adieu, Hawthorne Manor. Your ornaments are broken, your secrets laid bare. May you find peace in the spring." He stepped into the waiting motor, the door closing with a soft final click. The car crunched down. The drive, leaving the manor to its ghosts, and the slow, inevitable thaw. Chapter 9. Revelations by the Fireplace. The fire in the Hawthorne Manor drawing-room had burned low, its embers pulsing like a dying heart. Outside, the thaw had stripped the landscape bare. The snow was gone from the lawns, leaving only muddy scars and the skeletal branches of the rose garden. It was late afternoon on Christmas Day, the light already fading to a bruised violet. The house felt hollow, its grandeur diminished by the absence of its mistress and the echo of departing constables. Hercule Poirot stood before the hearth, a small, immaculate figure against the vastness of the room. The glass coffin ornament, the final token of Philip Thorne's vengeance, lay on the mantel, its silver skeleton glinting in the firelight. Around him, the remaining inhabitants of the manor gathered in a loose semicircle. Clara Hawthorne, pale and hollow-eyed, Miss Pritchard, wrists bandaged but composure restored, Colonel Bantry, shotgun finally relinquished, nursing a whisky, Victoria, cigarette trembling between her fingers, and Reginald slumped in an armchair, tie askew, eyes bloodshot. Inspector Japp leaned against the doorframe, notebook in hand, ready to record the final act. Poirot's voice, when he spoke, was soft but carried the weight of a gavel. "Mesdames et messieurs, the storm has passed, the snow has melted, and the ornaments are shattered. Yet the truth remains, sharp as glass. We have unmasked Philip Thorne, the silent night intruder, the architect of death, but the house is not yet clean. Let us, by this fire, lay bare the final deceptions." He placed the glass coffin beside the reconstructed shards of the previous ornaments, crimson, emerald, white, gold, black. Each piece caught the firelight, throwing fractured rainbows across the room. "Observe," Poirot continued, 6 ornaments, 6 sins, 6 deaths, or attempts. But the pattern was never Agnes's, nor Lady Eleanor's, nor even Philip Thorne's alone. It was a tapestry woven by many hands, each thread a lie. Clara's voice was a whisper. "I thought it was over when Agnes confessed." "Ma petite, confessions are like snowflakes, beautiful, but easily melted by the heat of truth." Poirot began with the first murder. He lifted the crimson bauble shards. Felix Carstairs, seeker of truth, struck down in the library. The candlestick, the shattered bauble, the word truth etched in gold. Philip Thorne killed him, yes, but who left Carstairs' notebook open to the page about the will? Who ensured Reginald's gambling debts were highlighted? He turned to Victoria. "Madam, you burned the ledgers, but you read Carstairs' notes first. You guided his questions." Victoria's cigarette fell, scattering ash. "I wanted the truth out. Reginald's debts were drowning us. If Carstairs exposed them, the bank would foreclose. I thought scandal would force change. Instead, it forced murder," Poirot said. "Philip, impersonating his brother, saw the notebook, feared exposure of the smuggling past. He struck." Reginald stirred. "And me? I burned the notebook to save my skin. Didn't know it'd get the blighter killed." Poirot's eyes flicked to him. "Monsieur, your lies were fuel. You entered the library after the murder, saw the body and fled. Your silence condemned Carstairs to be a footnote." He lifted the emerald shards. "Miss Agatha Hawthorne, poisoned by envy. She coveted her sister's pearls, her status, her life. Philip prepared the cordial, but who left the sugared violets, Agatha's favourite, on the table? Who knew she would eat them? He looked at Miss Pritchard. The governess flushed. I served the tray. Lady Eleanor asked me to. She said Agatha was peckish. Oui. Lady Eleanor, racked with guilt over Agnes, wished to silence her sister's taunts. She did not poison the sweets, but she ensured they were there. Philip added the cyanide. Colonel Bantry slammed his glass down. Eleanor was no killer. No, Poirot agreed, but she was an accomplice by omission. She knew Philip was not Percival. She saw the resemblance, heard the change in voice. She said nothing, hoping the murders would purge the house of its sins. The White Angel shards came next. Percival Thorne, strangled and hanged, his pride shattered. Philip killed his own brother to protect his deception. But who rigged the chandelier in the billiard room to fall if disturbed? Who ensured the priest's hole was left open? Poirot's gaze settled on Jenkins, who stood by the door, rigid as a soldier. The butler's voice was steady. I cleaned the chandelier weekly, sir. I noticed the wire was loose, but reported it to no one. Master Reginald ordered me to keep the passage clear for his late-night visits. Reginald flushed. I needed the wine cellar. Didn't know it'd be used for murder. Poirot nodded. Your greed, monsieur. Opened the door. Philip used it. The golden star shards glittered like spilled sunlight. Clara, accused of betrayal. She entered the library to stop the murders, shattered the star. But who placed the silver needle, coated with cyanide, in the shards? Who guided Clara's hand in her sleep to write the false confession? Poirot turned to Miss Pritchard again. I found Clara sleepwalking, the governess said, voice breaking. She held the needle. I took it, hid it, fearing she was guilty. I wanted to protect her. Mademoiselle, your silence nearly hanged an innocent. Philip planted the needle, knowing you would find it. Clara wept silently. I only wanted the poems to be free. The black tear shard found outside was last. Lady Eleanor's confession, noble, tragic. She believed Agnes the killer, took the blame to save her. But who wrote the note in Clara's mitten, luring her to the chapel? Who planted the derringer in Shum? Lady Eleanor's sleeve. Poirot's eyes swept the room, settling on Colonel Bantry. The old soldier's face crumpled. I couldn't let Eleanor hang. She was Geoffrey's wife, my friend's widow. I forged the note, hid the gun, thought if she died by her own hand, the scandal would end. Poirot's voice was gentle. Mon Colonel, you betrayed your honour. Philip used your loyalty, left the shards to seal the deception. Finally, the glass coffin. Philip Thorne, the silent night intruder, planned to vanish on the 3 o'clock train. But who delayed the constable's departure with a false report of a prowler in the village? Who ensured Philip had time to climb the roof, plant the coffin, and escape? Poirot looked at Japp. The inspector stiffened. Not me, Poirot. I was with the men all morning. No, but the village constable received a telephone call from this house. The exchange logged it at 8:17 a.m. Poirot produced a slip of paper. The call came from the nursery extension. Miss Pritchard. The governess shook her head violently. I was with Clara. Clara's voice was barely audible. It was me. I made the call. I thought if the police stayed, they'd find the real killer. I didn't know it was helping him escape. Poirot knelt beside her. Ma petite, your heart was pure, but your actions were manipulated. Philip knew you would act to save the house. The room was silent, the fire's crackle the only sound. Poirot stood, the glass coffin in his palm. Philip Thorne was the hand that struck, but this house was the mind that guided. Each of you, Victoria's ambition, Reginald's greed, Miss Pritchard's silence, Colonel Bantry's loyalty, Clara's desperation, Lady Eleanor's guilt fed the killer's design. The ornaments were not just signatures, they were mirrors. You saw your sins and did nothing. Victoria stubbed out her cigarette. What now? The manor is ruined. The name is mud. Poirot's smile was faint. Madam, ruins can be rebuilt. Truth is the first brick. He turned to Japp. Philip Thorne is in custody. The charges against Lady Eleanor and Agnes will be dropped. The rest, he gestured to the shards, the rest is for your consciences. As the sun set, Poirot prepared to leave. The Daimler waited, engine purring. Clara stood at the door, clutching a small parcel. For you, she said. I made it before. Everything. Poirot opened it. A single glass ornament, a perfect sphere, clear as spring water, with a tiny flame painted inside. No sin, no symbol, just a light. Ma petite, he said, you have given me hope. He climbed into the car. As it pulled away, he looked back. The manor stood against the twilight, its windows glowing like eyes finely opened. The shards were swept away, the fire banked, the ornaments gone. But the flame in the sphere burned bright in Poirot's pocket, a promise that even in the darkest house, truth could find a spark. Chapter 10. The Killer Unmasked. The twilight deepened into a velvet indigo, the last light bleeding from the sky like wine from a cracked goblet. Hawthorne Manor stood silhouetted against the fading day, its chimneys no longer smoking, its windows dark save for the drawing-room where a single lamp burned. The Daimler had not yet departed. Its engine idled in the drive, headlights cutting twin tunnels through the dusk. Hercule Poirot stood on the front steps, the clear glass sphere from Clara warm in his pocket, his valise at his feet. Inspector Japp waited by the car, impatient, watch in hand. Poirot, the train won't wait forever. Philip Thorne's in the cells. The confessions are signed. The ornaments are dust. Let's go. Poirot did not move. His moustaches twitched. His green eyes reflected the lamp's glow like polished jade. Mon ami, the symphony is not complete. There is a final note. Discordant, yes, but necessary. Japp sighed. You and your notes. What now? Poirot turned back to the house. The recreation. We must return to the beginning. Christmas Eve, the gift exchange, the midnight hour. The killer struck then, and only then will the mask fall completely. They re-entered the manor. The drawing-room had been prepared as Poirot instructed. The scorched Christmas tree dragged back from the courtyard, its bare branches draped with the few intact ornaments salvaged from the safe. Simple baubles, stars, angels, none of the deadly ones. The clock was set to 11:55. The household assembled, reluctant but compelled. Clara in her hollyberry dress, Miss Pritchard beside her, Victoria in emerald velvet, Reginald sober for once, tie straight, Colonel Bantry, ramrod stiff, Jenkins and the remaining staff in the shadows. Poirot stood beneath the mistletoe, the clear sphere in one hand, a small silver bell in the other. Mesdames et messieurs, we recreate the scene. Philip Thorne believed he had escaped on the 3 o'clock train, but the train was delayed by fog in Oxford. He never left the county. He is here, now. A collective gasp. Japp's hand went to his revolver. Poirot rang the bell. At midnight, the gifts were to be exchanged. Philip planned his final murder then, Lady Eleanor, with the black tear ornament symbol of grief, but the pattern was interrupted. Tonight, we complete it. He placed the clear sphere on the table amid the wrapped gifts, empty boxes, mere props. This ornament has no sin. It is truth. The killer cannot resist it. The clock struck 12. The room held its breath. A panel in the wainscoting slid open, the priest's hole. Philip Thorne stepped out, dishevelled, eyes wild, a shard of black glass in his hand, the missing piece of the tear ornament salvaged from the study floor. He had hidden in the passages, waiting for nightfall, planning to finish his work and flee under cover of darkness. "You," he snarled at Poirot. "How?" Poirot's smile was serene. "Monsieur, you are a creature of pattern. The ornaments were your voice. When the house burned the tree, you salvaged the black shard, your masterpiece. You could not leave without using it. The clear sphere was bait. You saw it from the passage, believed it the final ornament, unmarked, waiting for your sin." Philip lunged, shard raised. Jap tackled him. The glass flew, shattering harmlessly on the rug. Constables, hidden in the corridor, swarmed in, cuffing the struggling man. As Philip was dragged away, Poirot addressed the room. The motive? Revenge for a brother's betrayal and a family's. Sir Geoffrey promised Philip a share in the smuggling profits, then left him to drown when the boat capsized. Percival, the loyal brother, took the accountant's post, falsified the will to erase Philip entirely. Philip survived, returned, killed his twin, and began the ornament killings, each victim a mirror of the Hawthorne's sins against him. He turned to Lady Eleanor's empty chair. "Your husband's accident was no accident. Philip cut the rigging. He waited 5 years for perfect vengeance. Christmas when the family gathered, ornaments glittering like targets. Victoria's voice was hoarse. And us? We were pawns. We. Your secrets fed his fire. Carstairs' probing, Agatha's envy, Thorne's greed, Clara's poems, Miss Pritchard's knowledge, all threads he pulled." The manor exhaled. Philip Thorne was bundled into a police van, his screams echoing into the night. The clear sphere remained intact on the table, its painted flame flickering in the lamplight. Clara approached Poirot. "What happens to us? Ma petite, you rebuild. The manor is yours, free of debt, the ledgers burned, the secrets buried with the snow." Colonel Bantry cleared his throat. "I'll fund the repairs. Owe it to Geoffrey." Reginald stood. "I'll sell the London house, pay the staff proper wages." Victoria stubbed out her cigarette. "And I'll divorce the fool. Start fresh." Miss Pritchard smiled faintly. "I'll stay, teach Clara, and poetry." Jenkins bowed. "The house will rise again, sir." Outside the stars emerged, sharp and cold. Poirot climbed into the Daimler, the clear sphere in his pocket. As the car pulled away, he looked back. The manor's windows glowed warmly, figures moved within, beginning the long task of healing. Jap lit his pipe. "Satisfied, Poirot? Oui, the killer is unmasked, the ornament silenced, but the greatest mystery," he held up the sphere, "is this, a gift with no sin. In a house of shattered glass, Clara gave me light." The car turned onto the main road, the manor fading into the night. Behind them, Hawthorne Manor stood reborn, its Christmas finally at peace. Poirot leaned back, eyes closing. "Joyeux Noël, Hawthorne Manor, your ornaments are whole again." The flame in the sphere burned steady, a tiny heart of hope in the Belgian detective's hand.